Richard Oldman Harrison wasn't just a grumpy but likable character on the hit reality show Pawn Stars. He was also a man who built an empire with hard work, skill, and a sharp tongue. He became a fan favorite almost instantly when the show premiered on the History Channel in 2009. But Richard had already started building his fortune long before Pawn Stars became one of the network's most popular shows. It all began at the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in Las Vegas, Nevada. Along with his son Rick Harrison, he opened the shop in 1989. From the very first day, it was the 247th operation. It wasn't fancy or flashy, but it became a lifeline for people looking to buy, sell, or pawn valuable items. Over the years, the shop became known for its honesty, expertise, and the wide range of historical and unique items that came through its doors. Richard got the nickname Old Man in his late 30s because of how stern he was, but from 1994 until he died, he worked harder than anyone else. Richard never missed a workday, even though he was 77 years old. He was dedicated to the shop and his family, and that never changed. Then Pawn Stars came along and changed everything. What began as a simple reality show idea quickly became a cultural phenomenon. Viewers loved the mix of history, humor, and family dynamics. The show became the most watched show on the History Channel within 3 months of its debut, and over the years nearly 300 episodes have been filmed. The Harrison family famous and made the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop a must-see for fans traveling to Las Vegas. As a key character on the show, Richard made $15,000 per episode, and the show's huge popularity brought in $3 million per episode for the network. It's no surprise that Richard's net worth grew to $8 million by the time of his death in 2018. His wealth came from running the pawn shop for decades and his knack for finding valuable items. Richard Old Man Harrison worked hard, had great business sense, and could make even the most unexpected things pay off. But how did he become so wealthy? What were his secrets? More importantly, who would inherit his $8 million fortune? To understand how Richard Harrison became the old man with a $8 million net worth, you have to look back at his childhood. He was born in Danville, Virginia in 1941 and grew up in a poor family. His parents moved to Lexington, North Carolina when he was a year old, and they moved into a small house on Peacock Avenue. Life wasn't easy, and Richard learned early on how important it was to work hard. By the time he was 14, he was already driving a school bus to make money, even though he only made $5 or $6 a week. He dropped out of high school in his junior year to help support his family, but things took a sharp turn when he was arrested for stealing a car. He had to choose between jail and the Navy, even though he was under a lot of stress. No one could have predicted that Richard would join the U.S. Navy at age 17 and serve for 20 years, rising to the rank of Petty Officer First Class and working on 4 ships, including the fleet tug USS Chowan. His job as a paymaster taught him how to manage money, which he later used in his pawn shop. But life in the Navy wasn't all fun and games. Richard spent 14 of his 20 years deployed at sea away from home. "That's the only thing I didn't care about," he once said about his family. Despite the hardships, Richard stayed in the Navy because he felt a deep sense of duty. One of his duties was to his family. Richard married Joanne Rue, his high school sweetheart, in 1960, soon after having their first child, Sherry, who was born with Down syndrome. To pay for her expensive medical care, Richard re-enlisted in the Navy after a short break. Sadly, Sherry died at age 6, but her memory and the sacrifices Richard made for her shaped him into a man who always put his family first. When Richard retired from the Navy in 1979, he and Joanne were faced with a new challenge. Joanne had built a successful real estate business, and Richard joined her as a part-time employee. For a while, they were doing very well, but the economic downturn of the early 1980s and skyrocketing mortgage interest rates caused their business to fail. They lost almost everything, including $1 million in savings, and were left with only $5,000 to their names. In 1981, Richard and Joanne moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, with their 3 sons to start over. It was in Las Vegas that Richard's business sense and determination really started to shine. With their last bit of money, he and his son Rick opened a gold and silver coin shop in a tiny 300-foot space. It wasn't fancy, but it was a start. Over time, they moved to a bigger space and grew their business, eventually getting a license to buy and sell used goods. But Richard and Rick had bigger dreams. The Harrisons wanted to open a pawn shop, but at the time, Las Vegas only gave out 1 pawn license for every 50,000 residents. They had to wait until the population reached 250,000 before they could open the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, which is only 2 miles from the Las Vegas Strip. The business grew steadily, and by 2005, Richard and Rick were lending out about $3 million a year and making $700,000 in interest. The pawn shop became a gathering place for gamblers, collectors, and history buffs alike. The shelves were full of jewelry, sports memorabilia, and rare items with interesting stories. Richard was known for having a sharp eye and not wasting time when negotiating. He could spot a fake in seconds and wasn't afraid to walk away from a bad deal. His time in the Navy had taught him discipline, and his hard times had taught him wisdom. But in 2009, when the History Channel launched Pawn Stars, the family business became a worldwide sensation. The show's mix of history, humor, and family dynamics made it an instant hit. Pawn Stars became the most popular show on the network, which was a surprise to Richard, but he took it in his stride. Known for being grumpy but likable, he often played the role of the grumpy patriarch behind the scenes, even though he was very involved in the business, and often got to the shop before anyone else and stayed late to make sure everything ran smoothly. The show's success brought the family a lot of money. The shop went from having 70 customers a day to having thousands by 2012. It was drawing 3,000 to 5,000 people a day. Every day, people waited in line to meet the Harrison family and see the store that had become a part of pop culture history. Richard made $15,000 per episode, which added to his growing wealth. By the time he died in 2018, he was worth an estimated $8 million. But Richard's wealth wasn't just about money. It was about the values he taught his family. He taught his kids and grandchildren the value of hard work, honesty, and perseverance. Even though he was successful, he never forgot where he came from. No matter what life threw at him, he believed in moving forward and not dwelling on the past. As he once said, "You've got a life ahead of you, live it to the fullest." Who would inherit the wealth that Richard worked so hard to build? How did his death affect his family and the business he left behind? Richard Oldman Harrison died in June 2018 and left behind a legacy that went far beyond the walls of the gold and silver pawn shop. Known for Richard's death was caused by his sharp mind, rough sense of humor, and deep love for his family. As with any family fortune, Richard's death raised questions about who would continue his work and benefit from the empire he built. His will laid out his estate, which was worth about $8 million. Surprisingly, his will wasn't as simple as you might think. While his wife Joanne and his 3 sons Rick, Joseph, and Christopher were initially named as beneficiaries, Richard made a shocking change just 1 year later. Early in his life, Richard changed his will and purposely took his youngest son Christopher off the list of beneficiaries. In the new version, he wrote, "I would like to express my love and affection for Christopher Keith Harrison. However, for the purposes of this, will I have intentionally and with full knowledge failed to provide for him and his issue." This choice confused many fans and even some family members as to why Richard would leave his youngest son out of the will. Unfortunately, Richard never explained his reasoning, so the specifics of this choice are still a mystery. Whatever the reason, it was clear that he had given a lot of thought to how his estate would be split. The majority of his money was given to his wife Joanne and his son Rick, who had worked with him for decades to run the pawn shop. Rick was the oldest son and was the most involved in the business. Rick had worked with his father since the pawn shop opened in 1989 and was deeply affected by his death. He called Richard his hero and said that Richard taught him the value of hard work, honesty, and humor. For Rick, continuing the family business wasn't just a duty, it was a way to honor his father's memory. Under Rick's leadership, the gold and silver pawn shop has remained a thriving business and a must-see destination for fans of Pawn Stars. But Richard's death affected more than just Rick. His grandson, Corey Harrison, who is known to fans as Big Hoss, also felt the weight of his grandfather's legacy. Corey grew up in the pawn shop and learned the trade from both his father and grandfather. Corey often talked about how much he admired Richard's work ethic and business sense. After Richard's death, Corey vowed to carry on the lessons his grandfather had taught him in the shop and in life. Austin Chumley Russell is also a very important person in the family. Richard treated Chumley like family, even though they weren't related by blood. Richard teased Chumley on the show, but it was clear he had a soft spot for him. Chumley has said that Richard helped him grow professionally and personally, especially by teaching him to stay grounded and work hard. Richard's wife Joanne played a quieter but equally important role in the family while she was married to Richard. Richard's family was his biggest supporter for almost 60 years. From their early struggles in real estate to their eventual success in the pawn business, Joanne was there for him every step of the way. Even after Richard's death, Joanne remained an important figure in the family, giving her children and grandchildren strength and advice. But Richard's influence didn't end with his family. His legacy included the millions of fans who watched Pawn Stars and came to love the old man for his wit. After he died, tributes came in from all over the world. Fans shared their favorite moments from the show, remembering Richard's grumpy but endearing personality. Coworkers from the History Channel and other shows like American Restoration and Counting Cars also paid their respects, showing how much of an impact he had on reality TV. One of the most touching tributes came in the form of a special episode of Pawn Stars called A Treasure Remembered. Richard's life and legacy were honored with interviews with his family and some of his best moments on the show. It was a chance for fans and family to remember the man who had become a cultural icon while staying true to himself. Richard had an undeniable effect on the business world, but his most important influence was on his family. He taught them to value hard work and to never give up no matter how hard things got. These lessons helped the family get through some tough times from the early days of the pawn shop to the challenges that came with Richard's fame and success. It was never about the money or the fame. It was about building something lasting that his family could be proud of. So while the way his estate was divided may have caused some controversy, there's no denying the strength of the legacy Richard "Old Man" Harrison left behind. His family continues to honor him by running the business he built, teaching the next generation his values, and keeping his memory alive through the show that made him famous. What did Richard do outside of the pawn shop to make a difference in the world? What awards and honors did he receive for his work in the industry? Richard Oldman Harrison wasn't just a star on Pawn Stars or the owner of a famous pawn shop. He became a symbol of hard work, determination, and pride in his craft. His influence went beyond the show, and over the years he received many awards and honors for his contributions to both the entertainment industry and the business world. Richard and the rest of the Pawn Stars cast got one of the most important awards of their careers when Las Vegas Mayor Oscar Goodman gave them a key to the city. This wasn't just because of how successful the show was. It was also because of how they brought people to Las Vegas and brought attention to the city's unique culture. The Harrisons showed their gratitude by giving the mayor a set of collectible coins, which showed how deeply they were connected to the city that gave them their start. Not only that, but Richard was honored in his hometown of Lexington, North Carolina, where he grew up and started to form the values that would guide his life. Mayor Clark Newell gave him the key to the city and officially named a day in his honor, Richard Harrison's Day. For Richard, this was a kind of homecoming, a chance to think about how far he had come from his humble beginnings in Lexington. Later that same year, the Pawn Stars cast served as grand marshals at the History 300A NASCAR race at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. It was a moment that showed how the show had become popular culture. What began as a small family business had become a phenomenon, and Richard was at the center of it all. In July 2012, the Clark County Commission named July 17th Pawn Stars Gold and Silver Pawn Day. During the ceremony, Richard didn't just enjoy the attention. He gave $1,000 to the Clark County Museum and even lent a U.S. Senate floor chair that had been used by Senator Patrick McCarran to the museum for a special exhibit. This action showed Richard's love of history and his desire to share it with others. Richard's contributions were also recognized by national platforms. In 2012, he and his son Rick were nominated for the Time 100 list, which was a big deal because it showed how influential they were, not only in the pawn industry, but also in pop culture. But Richard's fame wasn't limited to awards and ceremonies. He also used it to support important causes. He was willing to use his fame to help good causes, as shown by his special appearance at a celebrity bingo bow charity event at the Silverton Casino Lodge in 2012. These actions showed that he believed in giving back and using his fame to make a difference beyond the awards and charity work. Richard's personality and presence had a lasting impact. Fans loved him for his dry wit and rough charm, and he became an icon in the world of reality TV. He wasn't afraid to be himself. Whether he was negotiating a deal in the shop or Richard's legacy lived on after he died. An episode called A Treasure Remembered was dedicated to his memory. It wasn't just a tribute to the man who helped build the gold and silver pawn shop. It was also a way to show how much he meant to the fans, the community, and the industry he helped shape. Richard's rise from a small-town boy to a globally recognized figure shows what hard work and persistence can do. Richard Harrison started out with little, but he left behind a fortune, not just in money, but also in lessons, values, and memories. While his awards and praise were well-deserved, his real impact is felt in the lives he touched, whether through the family he raised, the fans he entertained, or the causes he supported. That's something that no amount of money or fame can ever take away. And that's why music